Hey nerds, and welcome to my first Final Fantasy budget deck tech, featuring Emet-Selch of the 3rd seat. I'm excluding the price of the commander in the total since pre-order prices at the time of recording are pretty volatile. I've been looking for an interesting Spellslinger commander for years now. My first Spellslinger deck was a pile of cards I opened from Guilds of Ravnica, and bulk I owned featuring Niv Mizzet Perun. It was a hot mess that kind of functioned, but was not great. Then I got gifted a budget Krark the Thumbless and Kaidel Chosen of Krufix partner deck one Christmas. It was so much fun, but it only came out on occasion since the turns would take longer than I wanted. Who knew flipping a bunch of coins would take a long time? So I put it back on the shelf and accepted the fact I would never find a Spellslinger commander that really jived with me. That wasn't until Emet-Selch was spoiled. Emet reduces the cost of any spell you cast from your graveyard by 2 generic. Now this effect might seem innocuous at first, but cheating on mana is one of the strongest things you can do in a game. Think about it this way. If you only cast 2 spells from your graveyard the entire game, you essentially got your commander out for free. However, that second ability is what drew me in. There are 2 key things to note about this ability, or I guess 3. First, you don't have to deal the damage. As long as your opponent lost life from any source, like fetch lands, you're good to go. Second, the spell would only be exiled if you were to put it back into the graveyard. And third, the ability does target, which means you can't target anything that's already on the stack, so you'll have to be careful with how you time things. Now the first idea I had was a Dimir buyback deck. Buyback is an additional cost, which Emet would reduce. So let's say you cast a clock spinning from your graveyard and pay the buyback cost for it. Instead of it being exiled, it would return to your hand, since Emet's second ability only exile the spell if it goes back into your graveyard. However, there are only 18 spells with buyback in Dimir, and I don't think that's enough to build a dedicated deck with them. But then I remembered a deck I played a few weeks ago. See, my best friend built a budget Lord of the Nazgul Dimir spells deck. He wanted some feedback, so I took it for a spin, and after playing it, it got me thinking about how to improve the deck. One idea I had was to build a Spellslinger Aristocrat deck. The deck makes a ton of tokens that can be sacrificed for value, and black has plenty of cards that drain when creatures die, or even sacrifice effects. So instead of doing a buyback deck, or some generic Dimir Spellslinger deck, I wanted to build this Dimir Aristocrat spell deck. The idea is pretty simple, even though it might sound complicated. You play instants, sorceries, and creature token generators, sacrifice effects to trigger Blood Artist effects for value, and then the said Blood Artist effects. And of course, I'll go over some other key cards you'll want to play in pretty much any Emet deck. And for all the spells I'm going over, I tried to prioritize spells that we could cast from our graveyard without needing Emet's second ability. It is great, but his mana reduction is also just really powerful, and we should take full advantage of that. The first set of spells I want to talk about are the token generators. Now these are spells that either make their own tokens, such as Lab Rat, Retrieve the Esper, and Otterball Antics, or they make token copies of your creatures, like Cackling Counterpart, Quasi-Duplicate, and Self-Reflection, or creatures that payoffs for casting spells, Lord of the Nazgul, Sedgemoor Witch, and Geralf the Fleshwright. Next are the value sacrifice spells. These are usually cheap instants that require us to sacrifice creatures to draw cards. So Nasty End, Deadly Dispute, and Corrupted Conviction. Now, like I mentioned earlier, because of how the stack works, you won't be able to cast, let's say, a Deadly Dispute from your graveyard the same turn you cast it, unless you have had your opponent lose life already, since it won't be in the graveyard to target. Which is why I added more sacrifice outlets like Carrion Feeder, Viscera Seer, and Yahenni Undying Partisan. Now, before we get into the Blood Artist effects, I wanted to share 5 cards I think are worth considering in nearly every Emet deck. And of course I'm talking about casual EDH, not CEDH here. Those being Lyre, Disciple of the Drowned, River Kelpie, Tygam, Master Opportunist, Una's Grace, and Siphon Life. Lyre turns Emet into a powerful mana acceleration tool, allowing you to recast all your instants and sorceries for cheaper from the graveyard with Flashback. River Kelpie provides powerful card advantage just from existing, and Persist makes it a bit harder to remove. Tygam can put spells you cast from your graveyard with Emet's second ability into Suspend instead of getting exiled forever. Also, both River Kelpie and Tygam work really well with clock spinning. Una's Grace essentially gives every land in your hand cycling for a blue, and Siphon Life is a cheap, repeatable way to trigger Emet's second ability. There are 3 main ways we're going to win with this deck. First are the aforementioned Blood Artist effects. These are cards that drain our opponents whenever creatures die, such as Albed Scavengers, Blood Artist, Mirkwood Bats, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Bastion of Remembrance. All these creatures also make a great kick to Rite of Replication target. The second option is to just beat face with tokens. Many of the tokens have some form of evasion, either flying or menace. And I even toyed around with the idea of adding Maskwood Nexus, Conspiracy, or Arcane Adaptation to make Lord of the Nazgul and Geralf the Fleshright even better. But that interaction I think is way too cute, and it doesn't help the main game plan of the deck enough. Finally, I always like adding one generically powerful win condition to a deck. Sometimes your key cards are exiled, or you're just way too behind on board. My go-to budget option is usually Exsanguinate. It can get your opponents low enough to finish off with a combo of drain effects, or if you just have enough mana to end the game on its own. I know it's a kind of boring win condition, but sometimes you just need a way to close out a game, and Exsanguinate's pretty good at that. And as always, you can find a link to my personal deck in the video description below. I would love to hear what Final Fantasy commanders you're looking forward to building, and after watching this video, check out my Final Fantasy Commander fun ranking. It's just the Commander deck commanders right now. I'll be working on a main set fun ranking separately. There are just way too many cards to cover in a single sitting. Alrighty nerds, I'll see you in the next one.